Hola amigos, soy Alejandro. Bienvenidos a KeySpanish. This lesson we're going to learn how to use structures like desde, desde que, hace, hace que, desde hace, which can create confusion sometimes. But all of them are used to do one of three things related to time. We can use them to mark the starting point of an action, to talk about the duration of an action, or to locate an action in time. Let's start with the most straightforward one. And that is marking the start of an action. Let's look at two examples. Estudio español desde 2021. I study Spanish since 2021. Estudio español desde la universidad. I study Spanish since college. So this desde is used with a date and can be translated as since. And this date can be both a specific time, like 2021, 2021, el martes, el mes pasado, el siglo XX, or some kind of event that we describe with a noun, right? Like since college, since my wedding, since the party, since the exam, la universidad, mi boda, la fiesta, el examen. So desde plus date will be since. Now, another example. Estudio español desde que me mudé a Madrid. I studied Spanish since I moved to Madrid. So now we're using desde que and a verb, which is also since in English, and that's when it gets a bit tricky. In English, you don't have this distinction, or you don't add anything when it's a verb instead of a noun, but in Spanish, we do. So it's desde plus a date, 2021, the wedding. But if we have a verb or some kind of action to describe the starting point, then you use que. Okay? So desde que. So let's practice. I know John since 2010. How do you say that in Spanish? Well, you can pause the video if you need to. It would be conozco a John desde 2010. Conozco a John desde 2010. Now, I have a car since I graduated high school. I have a car since I graduated high school. That would be tengo coche desde que me gradué del instituto. Coche en Spain, carro en Latinoamérica. Tengo coche desde que me gradué en el instituto. The important part here is the use of desde que with an action to graduate, and desde if it's just a date, 2010. Okay, so desde que, both since, quite straightforward. Let's move on to the next one, which starts to get a bit tricky. And it's talking about duration, not the starting point. The example here is, hace 6 meses que estudio español. I have been studying Spanish for 6 months. In English, you can also translate this as I have studied Spanish for 6 months, or I'm studying Spanish for the last 6 months, are also alternatives. This structure uses hace, then a quantity of time, que, and a verb in the present tense. And that's the key here. You translate this hace que as for in English. Hace 6 meses que estudio español, I have been studying Spanish for 6 months. And the action we are talking about, again expressing the duration for how long it has been going on, is still occurring in the present. It's still going on right now. And that's the most important distinction we're going to make with another similar structure. Okay? As native speakers, you need to be careful and do not translate this as estudio español por 6 meses, right? That doesn't sound natural, at least in Spain. And another thing you may tend to do is to use the pretérito perfecto again, because in English you would say, I have studied for Spanish for 6 months. That's perfectly fine. But in Spanish, again, not the most natural translation. You will be understood, and it's not necessarily wrong, but the best structure would be the present tense, estudio español desde hace 6 meses. Or hace 6 meses que estudio español. And now we go to this other structure. We have seen hace 6 meses que estudio español and estudio español desde hace 6 meses. And these two are identical. Okay, so don't worry too much about hace, que in present, and desde hace with the present tense. The only difference, the meaning there is no difference, but there is a difference in the structure, right? With hace, you first start with the amount of time, the duration, hace 6 meses que, and then you say what you did, estudio español. On the other hand, if you start with the action, if you start with the verb, saying what you did, estudio español, what you are doing, estudio español, then you use desde hace, right? Hace 6 meses que estudio español desde hace 6 meses. Vivo, o hace 6 meses que vivo en España desde hace 6 meses. Exact same meaning, just the order structure. Again, one more time, take a look. Hace, quantity of time, que plus verb. But with desde hace, we start with the verb and then desde hace, quantity of time. So it's a matter of order. This one is a bit more tricky. Let's practice. I have been working as a teacher for 10 years. How do you say this in Spanish? Pause the video again if you need to. That would be either hace 10 años que trabajo como profesor o trabajo como profesor desde hace 10 años. Both correct. I have been living in Spain for 6 months. Okay. Hace 6 meses que vivo en España. Vivo en España desde hace 6 meses. And now, to add a bit more complexity, but don't worry too much about this. It's just as important that you know, you are familiar with this, is that you can also use the structure llevar and the gerund. Llevo 6 meses estudiando español. Again, the same sentence we have been working on. So, I have been studying Spanish for 6 months. And mis padres llevan 20 años casados. My parents have been married for 20 years. This llevar and gerund could be even more intuitive for you as an English speaker because it's more similar to the ing. I have been doing something. Llevo estudiando, llevo haciendo algo. But it's not the point of this video. It's more hace, desde hace que, and these structures that create confusion between each other. Okay, and we have seen, remember how to mark the start of an action with desde plus date, desde que plus an event, an action. We have now just seen how to talk about the duration, how long have been something going on for, something that is still ongoing today. And lastly, the third use of this structure is to locate an action in time. Let's look at 2 examples. Conocí a John hace 2 meses. Hace 2 meses conocí a John. I met John 2 months ago. 2 months ago, I met John. Again, this flexibility in the order of the sentence is both the same in Spanish and in English. So you can place this verb, conocí, both before or after. Me mudé a Madrid hace 4 años. Hace 4 años me mudé a Madrid. I moved to Madrid 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I moved to Madrid. And in this structure, we use a past tense, and this is the big difference, a past tense, pretérito perfecto, or indefinido, hace and quantity of time. And this, instead of the translating it as for in English, remember, so I have been studying Spanish for 6 months. This is ago. I studied Spanish 6 months ago. I lived there however time ago. So with just hace and a past tense, we locate an action in time, in the past. With hace que, past present, talks about the duration of an action. So, hace 2 años viví en España. 2 years ago, I lived in Spain. Hace 2 años que vivo en España. I have been living in Spain for 2 years. So let's put everything together in a more visual way and with a couple more examples. The first use we saw is marking the starting point of an action. Trabajo como médico desde 2018. Trabajo como médico desde que me mudé a Barcelona. I work as a doctor since 2018 or since I moved to Barcelona. This is to mark the starting point of an action. And we do that with desde plus noun or desde que and a verb. You can translate it as since in English, right? Now, we express duration with trabajo como médico desde hace 5 años. Hace 5 años que trabajo como médico. I have been working as a doctor for 5 years. And now the emphasis is in for how long I have been doing something that, again, important, I'm still doing today. This is present tense desde hace, or hace que present tense, remember the same, just changes according to the structure, the order. And you say in English for. And the last one is locating an action in time. Hace 30 años trabajé como médico hace 30 años. I worked as a doctor 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I worked as a doctor. So this means that she is no longer a doctor, right? This event happened in the past and is no longer the case. And in English, you would use ago. Just to see this visually, remember marking the starting point, desde 2018, the duration of something, hace 5 años que, trabajo como médico, and locating something in the past, hace 30 años, past tense, trabajé. And to finish this video, you are going to learn about some questions around time. And this is because you are going to need these structures precisely when you are asked about things such as how long have you been doing something for, since when, or when was the last time that you did something. So let's look at the first case. So, ¿cuánto tiempo hace que estudias español? O desde hace cuánto tiempo estudias español? In the first case, you can also hear just cuánto hace que without tiempo. But both work. ¿Cuánto tiempo hace? ¿Cuánto hace que estudias español? This is how long have you been studying Spanish for? So if you are asked that, or also cuánto tiempo llevas estudiando español, it's the time to express duration with hace, present tense que, o desde hace. So hace 6 meses que estudio español. You can be asked desde cuándo you do something. ¿Desde cuándo vives en Barcelona? ¿Desde cuándo estás casado? So there's since when. Since when something has been going on. So you are marking now the starting point of an action. And if you are asked when was the last time you did something, ¿cuándo fue la última vez que visitaste España? Now is the time to use hace and a past tense. So hace 2 años, or you can use the verb also visité España hace 2 años. But just hace is enough in this context. I hope you found this helpful. The structures, again, to mark the start of actions, the duration of them, or locate them in time, in the past, with all of these desde que, desde hace, right? If you organize mentally the purpose of these structures, they are easier to understand. They don't mesh everything together. You can separate desde and desde que for just marking the starting point, and then deal with hace in the past to locate an action in time. And the one that's, in my experience, more tricky is this distinction between hace que and desde hace to express for how long something has been going on. But remember that it's just identical, all right? It's a matter of the structure of the order in which you place the verb, the action. And also remember the questions. When you are asked cuánto hace que or desde cuándo, you can reply now confidently using the right structure. So, muchas gracias por tu atención. Dale a like si te gusta el vídeo y nos vemos en clase. I will see you in class.